Hi dear students, today I will be conducting Mathematics 0580 Seminar 2021. I will be focusing on the Mathematics Core Paper 1 and Paper 3 as well as Mathematics Extended Paper 2 and Paper 4. Basically, I'm going to go through on the seminar outline which is on the syllabus content and as well as the content overview of your each paper 1 and 3 as well as paper 2 and paper 4 and the skills that will be assessed through the assessment overview and some example of our candidate response that are extracted from 2020 specimen paper and some answering techniques as well as some exam tips. Looking into the syllabus content, the learners who are taking the extended course basically need to know the entire syllabus, which is including the core content and some extra content. Whatever the chapter that we have learned so far from year 10 and 11, from chapter 1 up until chapter 33 will be covered for paper core and also paper extended. But that's only that those who are taking core paper, you guys just need to know on the selected subtopics that only will be covered for your paper. In this section, I will be showing you the outline of the syllabus that will be covered for core and also extended. Probably it will give you some basic idea that what you need to know on the each topic that will be covered. So looking into the topics over here, this topics is basically our seven very basic short topic that is actually came from 33 chapters. If you're looking at into these topics over here, you have the main topic which is number. This chapter number, it's a very famous questions that will come out in paper 2 as well as paper 1, and even it will come out in paper 3 and paper 4, some basic questions, and it involving from chapter 1 up until chapter 10 from the textbook. So if you're those who are taking core paper, basically you need to understand the entire chapter 1 up until chapter 10. But there's only that few calculations that involving what we call growth and exponential growth and decay, and the questions that involving a reverse percentage, and the questions that involving what we call upper bound lower bound, that is the extreme calculation that involve upper bound lower bound. That's the topic that is only there, it will cover in extended. So those who are taking a core paper, basically you just need to understand the basic chapter of the number, as well as you guys also need to focus on the algebra and the graph. And algebra and the graph, if you look at it, the basic calculation that you need to know on the rearranging formula, that we call it as the formula sequences, and you also need to understand on the simplifying expressions and the expansion of the brackets, or you're making it into the factorization, all the basic calculation that involve algebraic manipulations. That's the part that you need to understand. Not only that part, those who are taking core, you guys also need to understand on the solving linear equations, and as well as on the setting up the equation. But those who are taking extended, you guys need to understand on the algebraic fractions. You have a harder simultaneous equations. Proportion, you have two types of proportion. One is, we call it as the direct proportion. Another one, we call it as the inverse proportion. You guys need to understand both sort of proportion. And also you have the linear programming from the chapter 20, and functions from chapter 21, the basic calculations that actually involve on the derived function as well as the differentiation. This is only will be covered for the extended students. I would like to add on, for those who are taking extended paper, you guys also need to understand that those who are using what we call quadratic formula, you need to know how to solve the quadratic equation using quadratic formula as well as the completing the square. This is only will be covered for the extended students. And you need to know how to answer using solving inequalities. That will be also will be covered for the extended students. Okay, this is for the extended students. And moving on the coordinate geometry, for the core students, you guys need to know how to come up with your straight line graph, which involve mx y equals to mx plus c. You need to know what is gradient. You need to know what is the y-intercepts. You also need to understand what is how to come up with your gradient when you have the parallel line and all that. And for the vectors and transformation, the basic calculations are the one that involve in the vector, which involve the column vector. And the transformation, you have 4 sort of transformation. There is no change between core and extended. There's 4 transformation will be covered, which is translation, rotation, enlargement, as well as the reflection. Okay, and if you look at the for the extended students, you guys need to understand the magnitude of the vector. That means the calculation that involve magnitude of the vector. And you guys also need to understand on the line segment and the position vectors, which is only will be involved for the extended students. And looking into the geometry over here, you have to know how to calculate on the symmetry. You need to determine how many symmetry line and the order of the symmetry, the similarity, the congruence, the angle properties. All this will be covered for the extended as well as the core. So those who are taking the extended paper, for especially on the geometry, you can focus on the area and the volume of the similar shape. This part will be only covered for the extended students. And those who are taking core, you guys can focus on the parallel line, angle in the triangle, angle in the quadrilateral, regular polygons, tangent and diameters. Those who are taking extended, probably you guys can focus on the irregular polygons, cyclic quadrilaterals, and also on the alternate segment theorem. This one only will be covered for those who are taking extended paper. Moving on the mensuration. Mensuration is the common chapter that will be covered for core and also extended students. On the trigonometry, those who are taking core paper, you guys need to focus on the formula SOHCAHTOA. That's the basic calculation trigonometric formula that will come out in order for you to calculate the right angle triangle. And those who are taking extended paper, you guys need to understand on the formula on that involving sine rule, cosine rule, trigonometric graph, solving a simple trigonometric equations, as well as I will suggest you also to look into problems that involving using the 3 dimensions. That's for the extended students. Looking into the next 2 topics, that's a very heavy topics, which is the probability and as well as statistics. Probably normally they will be combining these topics together in terms of the Venn diagram, and probability questions are joined together. And looking into the probability questions, those who are taking core paper, you still need to know how to use the Venn diagram symbol between, which is on the union and also intersection on the shading part, as well as you guys need to know how to do the 3 diagrams and the possibility diagram. There's only one minor part will be included in the extended, which is the conditional probability. And looking into the statistics, if you look at in your chapter 31 and 32 in your textbook, the basic calculation in chapter 31, which involve pictograms, bar chart, pie chart, scatter diagram, the basic calculation that involve histogram, all this will be covered in your core paper. But those who are taking extended paper, you can focus on the histogram that bars with the unequal width and the cumulative frequency, box and whisker, all this will be covered for extended paper only. So we have selected questions that will be covered for the core paper, but entirely those who are taking the extended paper, you guys need to know core as well as the extended. So basically you need to know all the chapters that we have covered in year 10 and 11 so far. Okay, so moving on, how you will be assessed. Okay, the paper that you will be sit are different for core and extended courses. If you look at over here, you will be assessed at the end of the course with the 2 written exam, which you will be taken either you will be doing core paper or either will be doing extended paper. So those who are doing a core paper, you will have to sit for the paper 1 and paper 3, and those who are taking the extended paper, you will be sitting for paper 2 and paper 4. Paper 1 and paper 2 is a short answer based question, and paper 3 and paper 4 is a structured questions. Looking into your components at a glance over here, if you look at those who are taking core paper, you will be assessed through 2 papers as I mentioned to you in previous slide. You have paper 1 and paper 3. Your paper 1, it carries about 56 marks and you have about 1 hour, and paper 3 is a structured based questions and you have about 2 hours and 104 marks. If you look at the percentage, your paper 1 and paper 2, it carries about 35%, and your paper 3 and paper 4 carries about 65%. And those who are sitting for the extended paper, you have 2 paper as well, where you have paper 2 as well as paper 4. Paper 2, you have about 1 hour 30 minutes and it carries about 70 marks, and your paper 4 will carries about 2 hours 30 minutes and you have all about 130 marks. It quite number of a lot of marks that will be carries for your paper 4. That's about your component that at a glance with the core and extended. But basically the candidates need to answer all the questions. Those who are taking extended or core, you guys need to answer all the questions from the paper 1 and 3 as well as paper 2 and paper 4. And if you look into the on the percentage over here, this course over here, those who are taking the core content, is intended that your target grades is from G to C, and those who are taking the extended content, you have the target grades that's from D to A star. So all of the core content is in the extended content. If you look at the subject content over here, it has been organized from the number, algebra, shape and space, and also probability and statistics. It's not in the order, but they have given you the percentage. That means the content structure over here, it's actually allows the flexibility for the teachers to plan the delivery appropriately for the students. That's why this content percentage has been created. Okay, looking into the percentage over here, paper 1 and paper 3, those who are taking core paper, the number of the percentage that will be allocated for the number and algebra and the space and shape and space is quite number of questions will come on compared to the probability and the statistics. But if you're looking at the extended paper, the questions will be asked more on the algebra as well as the shape and space. You could see the difference between the core paper as well as the extended paper. The core paper, those who are taking core paper, if you look at the number, the questions that will be analyzed and given more on the 30 to 35% on the core paper and 50 to 20% for the extended paper. But if you look at the algebra, that will be a less question will be tested on the core paper, and there will be more percentage of the question will be tested on your extended paper. Same goes to your shape and space, is the similar way, and also the probability and statistics. And basically students are allowed to use calculator throughout the assessment, and you have to know how to use your calculator, how to check your answers, and how to apply the rounding appropriately and involving solving a question. So basically, those are taking core and extended, you guys need to understand when to apply three significant figures. Three significant figures will be required in the answer. That means basically we have to apply the three significant figures or all sort of questions, except for the what we call involving degree. For degree, we have to use one decimal place, and those questions that involving upper bound, lower bound, we are not allowed to write down our answer using three significant figure or one decimal place. We need to write down the entire answer is appearing in your calculator. That's only for the what we call upper bound and lower bound. Please take note on that part. And moving on, if you look at the candidate should use the value of pi from the calculator or the value 3.142. My suggestion is, since you guys are allowed to use our scientific calculator, so you just need to press the pi from the calculator in order for you to get a very accurate or precise answer. Okay, so moving on the next part here, we are going to look into certain components from your paper, each paper. Looking into your paper 1 here, this is a core paper. It's important that you need to understand different types of questions on your each paper that you can actually expect. So if you look at your paper 1 and paper 3, the number of marks that will be shown in the each paper, that means you could see over here the number of marks that you need to that will be allocated for each question. Okay, and you need to write your working and the answers in the space provided. You only need to write down the answer. You only need to write down the answer on the space provided, and you need to transfer your final answer at your answer column. The answer column is the one, that final answer that will be marked as your final. So you can use an electronic calculator in your both papers. You can ask your teacher. That means we are allowed to use our 570, the silver calculator. That's the only suitable calculator that they're allowed to use it in the exam. If you look at the paper 1, it contains a lot of short answer questions, and there's usually worth about 1 to 3 marks each, and some might be broken into 2 parts. So basically that you could see one example over here that is actually broken into 2 parts over here, and then it's each given 1 mark. Okay, and this is the question that require for you to explain, and it given you 1 mark. So basically you need to write down your answer into the answer column over here. But those who are taking paper 3, if you look at the paper 3, this is a structured based question. Each question can be split into many parts. That means you will not have a short question, you have a extended pace question. That means you have a long question that worth about 1 to 4 marks. Here are the example over here. In this example, you could see that, so question number 1, you have part A, you have part B, you have part C, you have part 3. It's like carry forward. So normally what it does, the questions that probably the answer that you have actually got it from part A, 1A, you might use that answer to answer the following question with this part B. So we might carry forward the answer in order for you to answer the following question. So you really need to take note when you want to carry forward the answer. Okay, and here are some example that you could see it over here. And later part are, let's say often the answer to be later parts will depend on the answer, as well as I mentioned to you earlier, that the answer will be carried forward, and you need to be very careful when you want to write down the answer. Those who are taking extended paper, is as well as it's the same thing, will be applied in your paper as well. Where paper 2 you have a short answer questions, and your paper 4 you have a structured based questions, and you need to answer all the questions in both papers. And where, just as I mentioned to you just now, your paper 2 carries about 70 marks, and your paper 4 carries about 130 marks. And even for your paper as well, it will be shown, the marks will be given at the end of your, at the each part is have been shown in your paper. Even though it's a paper 2 or paper 4, you have to write down your answer in the space provided. You have to, it's a requirement for you to write down your answer. Please use pen to write down your answer, do not use pencil. And paper 2 questions are the short answer questions, and most questions are worth about 1 to 3 marks. You have about 1 to 3 marks, with some being 4 or 5 marks. It can be gone until 4 to 5 marks easily. It's not that maximum marks that they could ask for your paper 2 is 5 marks. Okay, and some questions might be broken into 2 parts. That's also some example has been shown here. Okay, so basically, if you look at your paper 4, it's contain about structured questions. It's like what I have mentioned to you in paper 3. Is the same pattern will be applied in your paper 4 as well, where each question, it will be split into many parts, and each question can be worth gone up to 1 to 6 marks, a quite number of marks. So here are the few example also given. Even here also had been mentioned that the answer on the later part will be depend on the earlier part. That means the answer that you have gotten on the top, that means that you have answered for part A. For example, you might use to that value to answer your part B, so that might use to answer your part C. So it's like the answer will be carried forward at the bottom. So let's say your initial answer, that means your part A goes wrong, you're not able to answer the entire question. That is the challenging part that you need to take note on your paper 3 and paper 4, but it won't happen in your paper 1 and paper 2 because it's a short answer question. If you're not able to answer that particular question, you only will lose that marks over that for that particular question. It won't affect the other question. But paper 3 and paper 4, it will the other way around. Looking into the general advice that I could give it to you for all the papers that you guys are going to sit, you need to read the questions carefully and make sure that you need to understand what is being asked. It's very important for you to understand what is exactly they want in the question. Okay, and if the question asks you to leave the answer in 2 decimal places, you need to leave your answer in 2 decimal places. Okay, that's the requirement of the question. You need to give the priority for the required questions. Okay, and then you have give your answer to the accuracy indicated in the question. If none is given, then you can follow what I mentioned to you just now. There will be a certain question where they will be given you highlight part, where normally there will be a question on the quadratic those who are taking extended paper, quadratic equation that involving a quadratic formula. Basically, they will ask you to leave your answer, the final answer, to 2 decimal places. Okay, so in that part, we can't use the common instruction from Igcse, which is the 3 significant figures, or we can't use the 1 decimal place. Okay, on that part of question, you need to give the priority for the instruction that given by the question. If there is no accuracy indicated in the each question, then you can focus to leave your answer to 3 significant figures. It's very important. It's very important. It's already highlighted on the cover page of your exam. And also you have to leave 1 decimal place for the degree. You have to leave your answer to 1 decimal place, and you are advised to use pi from your calculator, as I mentioned to you earlier. Okay, and include units with your answers if they are not given on the paper. But basically in Igcse, they will be giving you the unit at the end of it, but if it's not given, please include the units and show your working. This is very important. Very important. In order for you to gain marks for the correct working, even if you have done incorrect answer. For example, even at the bottom here, at the answer column, you have given a wrong answer, but your working is correct, they still can consider and give you the allocation mark. If let's say it carries about 3 marks, probably you gain about 2 marks for your working, and probably you might lose that only 1 mark for the incorrect answer. Okay, and if you're not able to complete the whole question, for example, the question that involves simultaneous equation, for example, you're not able to calculate the y value, but you managed to calculate the x value, for example, at least you will get the marks for the x value. Okay, you know what I mean? So please show your method, please show your working. As much as you can see, if it's 1 mark, then not really have to show the working. If you see the 1 mark, more than 1 mark, like 2 marks, 3 marks, 4 marks, please show the working, and in order for you to get your answers. Okay, and if you make a mistake, this is very important, if you make any mistakes in your paper, clearly cross out any working or answers that you do not want to examiner to mark. If let's say you already said that instead of writing, for example, instead of writing 58.9, you wrote there as 2.74, you have to cut it nicely. So if you didn't cut it, they will consider that as your answer, and they will mark that as well. So that's the reason why you need to cut nicely, and then you have to indicate that whichever that they need to mark. Okay, you have to cross nicely, and if you need more space, you can ask for extra paper and clearly indicate where the rest of the answer will be written. Okay, so one of the additional paper, you have to make it clear, please label. If let's say you are requesting for extra paper, please label accordingly where you're going to write down the answer, where the answer will be written, which question you are referring to. All these instructions must be clearly mentioned for the examiner to mark your paper. Okay, and looking into the equipment, I've already mentioned to you a few times to you, but yet I would like to repeat here that you guys need to have either black pen or blue pen. A spare pen is always a good idea. You always must have a spare pen, and you're required to use a 2B pencil for the graph and the diagram. For mathematics, you need 2B pencil for you to draw the graph, to draw your cumulative frequency curve, to draw your histogram, to shade on your linear programming. Please do not color, just shade should be enough. And also you need to use pencil for the Venn diagram, to shade your Venn diagram. For all that, you are not allowed to use pen. You only allowed to use pencil, and you are allowed to bring our electronic calculator, as I mentioned to you, which is a scientific calculator. And then I want you to take note here that you're only allowed to bring the calculator itself, not the cover. You're not allowed to bring the cover, so only the calculator, and also protector, because sometimes those who are taking core especially, you need to measure some what we call bearing questions. Even paper 2 and paper 4 also, sometimes it involves some protector question, compass, as well as a ruler. Okay, so all these are the part that you have to bring it to the exam. And if you're stuck on the timing part, if you're stuck on the question, don't waste too much time of trying of answering one question. You can move on to the next part of the questions, and then you can come back to that once the part that you stuck later on. That means do not waste your time of thinking of settling that question first. Okay, probably later on, after settling with the other questions, and if you come back to that particular question, it might give you some kind of idea. Okay, so that is one of the tips that I would like to share it here. And then I would like to mention here that use any time that you have left at the end of the exam to go back and check your answers and the working. So if let's say you have done with your paper, you have complete your paper, and you have done the paper, and you still have some spare time, you still have time left, please go back to your initial questions that you have done. Go through your paper, go through your working. Please recalculate back whether you have done the calculation probably correctly or not, and then check back whether you have followed the 3 significant figures or 1 decimal place whenever it's necessary. Have you followed the what you call the accuracy indicated that will be in the question? All these are the one that you need to consider back the moment after you answered the questions. Okay, if you have a time, please do not submit your paper and leave the exam hall. You are allowed to check back your paper. Please check back your paper back again. Okay, that's one of the requests, one of the advice that I would like to give it to you. Moving on, are what skills that will be assessed. On this part are we have 2AO. We call this as the assessment overview. That is what we call it as the AO. Okay, assessment overview. The candidates was actually taking the core paper. As I mentioned to you just now, you are expected to achieve a grade D or below, or because that's the one that are from paper 1 and paper 3. These candidates are eligible to score where grade C to G. Okay, and those who are taking extended paper, you are expected to achieve grade C or above and should be entered into your paper 2 and paper 4. And the candidates you are eligible to score about A star to E. Looking into the assessment objective here, you need to understand that your assessment objective, the areas of the knowledge, understanding, skills that you will be assessed, that is the one that we call as the assessment objective. Okay, there will be an assessment objective that will be tested, which is in two ways. We call this as the AO1 and AO2. The first assessment objective is on the testing on your mathematic techniques. That means demonstrate knowledge and understanding of mathematic techniques. That means it's calculation that are substitution formulas, calculation that involve organizing, calculations that involves a simple methods that using a calculator, that you can be solved using calculator. Some very direct forward question, that is we call it as a mathematic techniques question. Okay, which involve in your everyday life situation. But looking into your AO2, where it involve a reason and interpret and communicate mathematically when solving a problem. So where you need to apply some suitable strategy, or you have to apply some appropriate techniques in order for you to come out with a solution. All this will be covered in your AO2. Not necessary that this AO1 will be only for core and AO2 is for extended. Not necessary, please don't misunderstood. So the AO1 and AO2, it will be covered in your paper 1 and paper 2, as well as your paper 3 and paper 4. Looking into your demonstrate knowledge and the understanding of the mathematical techniques, it will be covered for your the AO1. If you look at the percentage over here, I can highlight to you that paper 1, it comprised of 60 to 70 percentage, and your paper 3 will be for 60 to 70 percentage. That means your AO1, that means your assessment no objective 1, will be covered. That means our basic techniques, mathematics techniques calculation will be covered more compared to the solving problems questions that you need to understand on the interpreting, on the communication part, that more on the it will be covered more on the paper 2 and as well as paper 4. So that's why your paper 2 and paper 4 you have more. And if you look at compared to your paper 1 and paper 3. Okay, so let's get into deeper on your AO1 and AO2, which is the assessment objective 1. Assessment objective 1, that basically you need to show that you can recall and apply the mathematical knowledge, terminology, definitions to carry out single or multi-step solutions in mathematical of everyday life. That's what I mentioned to you earlier, which is involving on the organizing, processing, presenting information accurately in the written way, on the tabulate way, on the graphical way, or in the diagrammatic forms that's involved in your AO1. Okay, so those are actually involving questions that are probably that involving a number questions. Okay, that's not involving a much calculations. That sort of question you could expect on the techniques. Is very direct forward questions. Some questions that involving what we call a suitable method, a procedure that involve just using a calculator you can solve that, something like that sort of questions you can expect in this sort of AO1. But when you look at AO2, where you need to demonstrate, candidates should have to able to analyze a problem. You have to select a suitable strategy or apply appropriate techniques to obtain a solution. For example, I can give you a best example here. For example, if let's say you have a questions that involving trigonometry, where you need to decide, even though we are applying a techniques of a formula, you need to decide whether you're going to use a sine rule or cosine rule. If let's say some questions you might use a sine rule, and then you have to apply a cosine rule in order for you to calculate the length. You have to apply it, you have to think more, where you need to recognize and you have to organize it in order for you to answer some questions. So this sort of AO2, which is the assessment objective 2, you need to solve using unstructured problems by putting them into a structured way. And also you have to present arguments, you have to give a logical and structured way of answering the questions, and you also need to give the valid reason. Some questions involving a valid reason, and in this sort of questions you can expect a problem solving questions, like you could expect questions that involving a probability, tree diagrams, that sort of questions will be coming out in your AO2. So as I mentioned to you just now, if I go back to the previous slide over here, these are the percentage of the each component carries, where you could focus on the you could expect more questions that will be tested on the AO2 for paper 2 and paper 4. So basically you would not have those are taking core extended paper, you would not have the basic calculation. That means that it not involve a techniques based question. You might have the solving problem question will become more, will be tested compared to your paper 1 and paper 3. That's the part that you need to take note over here. So that's the part that I would like to highlight to you on the assessment objective, which is on what skills will be assessed. Okay, and moving on further on our next slide, which is the command words. The command words will help you out. If you understand the words, it will be helping you out to understand the question better. So you have, these are the command words that you need to understand for mathematics. It means that if let's say calculate, what do you mean by calculate? Calculate means is work out that the figure that using a calculator. That's about it, the calculator. So calculate. If let's say construct means you have to make a drawing, that accurate drawing. Describe in the sense that you have to explain. That's the meaning of describe. Determine, explain, give, plot. All these are the information command words that you need to understand in order for you to answer the question. Probably I can give you some example over here, that the question below is taken from paper 4, and it illustrates that 2 of the command words have been used over here. This is the paper 4, where they have mentioned here write down and also show that. Okay, the command word write down over here is actually indicates that you do not need to show any working. You just need to write down your final answer, and also you also can predict that why they're asking you to write down the answer, because it's only 1 mark. 1 mark, that means the mark only will be given for your final answer. Whatever answer that you have written for the answer column, I call this as the answer column. Whatever answer that you have written over here, that's the mark that we have given 1 mark here. Okay, so if let's say you have a question on the show that, okay, show that the number 203 is not in the sequence. So if you want to show that, that means something that you have to involve proving. You have to prove to them. So the command word show that indicates that you need to provide the evidence in the form of a clear mathematical explanation. It's not that I'm asking you to explain in the words. Show that in the sense that we have to prove it to them. We need to show using 8n minus 3, and in order for you to, how are you going to prove that it's 203 is not in the sequence? Okay, to demonstrate that, you have to explain your view through the number. You have to prove it to them. And the answer space is the case here that there is no dotted line. You could see it over here. There is no dotted line given for the show that they only have given the answer. So that means you just need to require for you to answer over here. You just need to answer over the space given here, and we call this as a blank working space. You just need to provide the answer over there, and then they will give you marks for this sort of questions over here. There won't be a single answer. They might consider if you have shown in the different way, or it depends how you're going to answer. Okay, so that's the two example command words that I will really shown you here. And then moving on, now we are going to get into the example of candidate response. Looking into the example of a candidate response here, in this section probably I'll show you some that advice or information, that example questions, and also the response that being demonstrated. Probably it will give you an idea how your responses might be viewed by the examiner, and also it not be listed what to do in all the questions, but I can give you some examples over here. Okay, and this section over here, this is actually I've taken from the this is one of the example questions that the learner responds from one of the paper, which is 2020 specimen paper, as I mentioned to you in the beginning. And probably it will give you an idea, or it will give you a help you to identify the command words and also the other key instructions that we have used within the questions, and also to understand what is required in your response. Probably this will be the part that you need to take note. So in this question over here, let's say the command words and the instructions in the question have been highlighted for you. For example, the command word that you could see in this question is work out the value of the part. Okay, so the part that you're going to calculate, that means the x as well as the y value, right? You are going to calculate your x and y value now. Looking at this question over here, the candidate has only received about 0 out of 1. Okay, that means that the candidates working suggested that the candidates over here, it did not receive the full marks. Even though they have received it 1 mark over there, they didn't receive the full mark. They have given you 0 mark over here because what is the explanation has been given here, that even though the candidate is understood that the angle sum of the triangle is 180, but they did not include the bracket. That means the calculation over here is not make sense. They're supposed to include the bracket over here in order for them to differentiate the total between 74 and 71. This workout over here, that the command word, as I mentioned to you over here, this indicates that the answer should be calculated from the given information, so there won't be any measurement that for you to score marks. And then basically, if you have this sort of questions, right, you could see a part here that which is not to scale. You always see this on whatever diagram that you have, you always see this part. This means over here that you cannot find the answer by measuring the diagram. That's the part that you need to take note. You could, whatever diagram they draw, they will mention this in your IGCSE papers, where we call this as a not to scale. This is the part that you need to take note as well. The allocation marks is the one that indicates that the answer that you can obtain with the minimum working. Even though over this question over here, it says that 101 mark, but then for you to get that 177 is not a sensible for this question. So for your Y, the candidate recognizes that there's only a parallel line, so there is no working required, there is no explanation required, since there's 1 mark, and you just straight away write your answer, which is 74. This is one of the example of candidate response. I can give you more that moving on the further. Here, if you look at this question over here, it says that work out as the same command word as well, but they have asked you to give reason. That means you have to show your working as well as you have to give your reason, because it's required 3 marks. And if you look at this question, give reason, that command work, it actually indicates that your answer should be supported with the reason. It's not, you have to mention your angle, and why you have mentioned that angle, you have to support that with a reason using a correct mathematical terminology, and you have to justify your answer. That is the what we call meaning of give reasons. Basically, this sort of questions you can expect in paper 2 as well as paper 3. Okay, and this sort of questions will come out in the angle properties. That we have actually done few questions recently that involving our alternate segment theorem, or angle at the center is twice the angle at the circumference, or angle at the same segment. This sort of properties that probably you might need to explain further. Okay, so basically in this question, the candidates is actually gathered 2 out of 3. The reason why, because the candidate has given a correct answer of W, but shown a correct working in 2 steps. Even the working that I've actually mentioned over here is correct, but looking at the reason that provided, it's not provided a reason to explain the angle 43. They lost mark for not also stating that angle of the sum of the triangle is 180. So that is the word that I have mentioned to you just now. When you want to explain, when you want to give reason, please use the properties of the circle to justify your answer. Okay, which means that probably if let's say you want to explain something regarding cyclic quadrilateral, and then you can talk about cyclic, you have to talk about the mathematical terms. They say that angles of the straight line add up to 180. That's not justify the reason for you to calculate using 180 minus 85. You have applied angles in the sum of the angles in the triangle concept, but your explanation is talk about the straight line concept. It's like nothing relevant to. That's the reason why this candidate has actually received about 2 out of 3. Okay, moving on, there will be one more example over here. It says that use trigonometry. That means it's a compulsory for you to use the trigonometry method. So use trigonometry to use your calculate the value of P. So basically what you have to do, you have to decide whether you are going to use SOHCAHTOA. Okay, either SOHCAHTOA. They have already mentioned here they're going to use sine here. The candidates has correctly used the trigonometry. That means the candidate already selected SO will be the answer. Okay, that means the candidate have used the trigonometry to calculate, that indicates that the method that given information to write down the answer, and the calculator is needed for them to solve this problem. So if you do not use the trigonometry, definitely you can't expect to be awarded any marks for this question, even though it's a 2 marks. So basically what I'm trying to say, even though you found some other calculation that is not involving trigonometry and you're able to solve to calculate the angle P, you are not able to get that 2 marks, because the question already mentioned that the command work that used in this question is use trigonometry. So by right, you're supposed to use your trigonometry formula in order for you to get the marks. So here, let's look into why this candidate is only got 1 out of 2, because it says that this candidate is actually rounded 0.533. This is recurring, where 8 divided by 15 to 0.52. So basically, if you ask me, I will suggest you that this is a common error that will make by the students. You just need to use fraction mode, and you press the shift button, shift sign 8 over 15 to be in the safe side. Since you're using a scientific calculator, you just need to press shift 8 over 15. That will be give you a very accurate answer. instead of taking out some values and then keying it back into the calculator. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Instead of taking it out for 0.53 and then entering back into your calculator, you just need to press 8/15 will actually give you an accurate answer when you have this sort of questions, okay? And if you press this in your calculator, shift sign 8/15, you will have in your calculator, you will have about 32.0. okay, you just need to take note on that part, okay? And whatever that you have to, for you to calculate in your using calculator, make sure you press the shift button in order for you to calculate the angle, okay? But if you want to calculate using the Pythagoras theorem, it's not a problem. But if you want to use in order for you to calculate the angle, it's compulsory for you to press the shift button if you want to press that in your calculator, okay? And moving on the other part of the question over here, okay, if you press this in your calculator, shift 8/15 in your calculator, it's actually appeared as 32.23 and move on. So you can't expect your answer to be 32.0. You're supposed to write down the answer to one decimal place, which is 32.2. okay, please take note. Yeah, that's the reason why I'm asking you to leave your calculator. Just press your calculator, shift sign 8/15. okay, so we're moving on our next slide over here. It mentioned that the diagram shows, this is one of the example for paper 2 or paper 4 for the that involving a Pythagoras theorem. The diagram shows the path of the plane from airport A to airport B. So the command word that I've really used is actually show that. That means indicates that the answer is given. You need to write down all the steps in the method that leads to you given the answer. You need to provide the evidence, okay? In order for you to get the full marks over here, you need to tell them how to use the Pythagoras theorem, okay? But in this question, if you see, you have never shown, that means the candidate over here, it never shown that they have used the square root. Okay, even though they're calculating the distance, you're going to prove it to them, but the proven is not fully has shown. You could see that they have actually missed out an important, they have highlight to you, they have missed out an important step by not showing that they need to take the square root. Where's the square root in order for you to get your 375? So they have missed the square root. For that reason, they have missed out 1 mark. Can you see? This is the careless that the students used to do. And as this they show that the question, they missed the key step, the method, they cannot be awarded the full marks. Just miss a square root, you can leave 1 mark. You can lose about 1 mark. Okay. And even though the answer is correct, but then it's like in order for you to prove the questions, you have to show the entire working of the questions. So moving on, there's one more example that I could share it with you over here, which is the plane flies an average speed of 450 kilometer per hour. It's actually a combined questions of your D part 1. So it leaves at 14:45 and flies directly to B. As I mentioned to you just now, this question, this person have done it correctly, where you can give them 1 mark over here, where you can give them 1 mark over here, but you can give another 1 more mark for your final answer. But what's the reason why they didn't give you the final marks over there? Because this candidates didn't mention that it's AM or PM. You have to mention whether it's a AM or PM, because the question is asking you to work out the time that the plane will be arrives. It could be AM, it could be PM. Okay, so if you do not want to leave your answer in terms of AM or PM, at least you have to leave your answer to 24-hour clock or 12-hour clock. Okay, I have explained thoroughly here. The candidate has found that the time by correctly dividing the distance by the speed and recognize that this is the hours. When converting the answer to the decimal, they have not rounded the decimal but left it's the full value on the calculator to get 50 minutes. Okay, they have done it over here for you, which is the correct approach. Yeah, which is the correct one. What I have done is correct, but Unfortunately, after the converting the time, the candidate is actually did not include the PM to indicate the time that it is in the afternoon. If you do not want to include the PM, at least you have to mention your answer in 24 hours clock, okay? So at least you might get marks from that part, so that the candidate only will be getting 3 marks will be awarded for all the correct method, but a mark will be lost. That means 1 mark will be lost for the final marks. That means they won't be giving you the final mark over here. They only will be giving the 2 marks. 1 mark will be awarded for your calculation, 1 mark will be awarded for you to change over here, and 1 mark for your calculation over here, but probably you might lose the marks for your final answer, okay? So in order for you to get that full 4 marks that will be suggested, you might need to show the several steps in order for you to get the full 4 marks, you know, okay? So these are the common part that I would like to highlight to you. These are the common mistake that students used to do it as well, but I would like to highlight to you one more part over here in your part C, right? The candidate is actually have used this is the angle, isn't it? So you have to apply 1 decimal place. That's the part that I would like to highlight to you back here, because if something that involving angle, you need to leave your answer to 1 decimal place, but something that required you to answer the length, where we will be involving to what we call 3 significant figures, okay? These are the common mistakes that the student used to do. These are the common mistakes that student used to actually make it during the exam time, and the command works is actually play an important role in order for you to understand the questions and work out the question appropriately, okay? And then there will be some general advice that I would like to share it to you. In order for you to do your best when answering a mathematics question, make sure that you revise all the topics from the syllabus that you are studying before the exam. So that is the initial part that I would like to highlight to you here. And basically, before you start your revision, before you start answering the questions, and when you're doing a revision, please do not, the core students, please do not go and focus on your extended topics. That's the reason why I've highlighted to you in the beginning of the slide itself what are the things that you need to consider for core or as well as for extended. If you really still don't get which chapter is actually comprising core or which chapter is comprising extended, if you would like to do a revision on the topic base, please refer on your textbook. On the first page, you can see the list of the chapters that actually that will be needed for your core as well as your extended, okay? And as well as you also need to understand what all the key terms and the command words on the key question means, okay? You need to understand what the question really want for you to, in order to avoid the error that the common error that will make by the students. And please read the questions carefully and then consider what you need to do it before you do it, okay? So please read the questions carefully, whether is there any special requirement that I've asked for the questions in order for you to do it, okay? So do not simply answer it without reading the questions. So only round the final answer, not intermediate the values, okay? Only round off the final answer. What it means over here, if something a questions that involving a pi, for example, okay, and you are going to use probably I use the space over here to explain you. If let's say you're calculating arc sector, okay, if I have to do few parts for me to get my arc sector. Let's say I'm applying a calculation that involve an angle. So 45 over 360, I'm going to multiply with 2 pi r. So let's say I have to do this calculation. So if I use this calculation 30 unless I have to multiply that with a pi, but I'm not going to multiply with a pi. If I use this in your calculator, I have 3 over 4 pi. Okay, I didn't multiply that because I'm going to, let's say I'm going to add on this with my circumference, for example. 2 pi over 3, so I have 6 pi. So in order for me to get the total length, this is your part A and this is my part B. I'm going to get my total length of my part A and B. Then I can add the pi over here. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here, instead of getting the decimal here and the decimal, you can get the final answer decimal. That will be more accurate. You understand what I mean? This is what that I would like to highlight to you, that in mathematics we will play around that to use the calculator more compared to make it into decimal, because the moment you take it out from the calculator, you need to take a very long answer in order for you to get an accurate answer at the bottom later. So that is the reason why they say that only round off the answer at the final value. Okay, if you decided to take the part at the part A over here, make sure you take the long answer. So it's better of you to leave your answer in terms of pi. At the later on, you can convert that to the decimal. Okay, and also you have to show all the steps in your working and show them clearly. Do not write your answer here and there. Please follow the sequence. You have to write down the answer, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Okay, and try to show all the steps that required. Sometimes the algebraic questions that required about 5 marks. So each row of your questions will provide you 1 mark. So it's better of you to show. In order for you to get that full 5 marks, you need to explain in mathematical terms in further. That means you have to show the working. So you can't expect to show your less working and then you can't expect to get the 5 marks, right? So you have to show all your working, and you need to round to the answer correct to the degree of accuracy, in the sense that what it means that if, let's say, if the question didn't mention about converting a special request, so you have to leave your answer to 3 significant figures, or you might leave your answer to 1 decimal place. Okay, and when it comes to upper bound, lower bound, please take note. Upper bound, lower bound, let's say for example, this is one of the example. For upper bound, let's say I have a calculation that involves 6.75 and 3.75. That's what I have figured out. So involving a multiplication, let's say my calculator answer is appear as 25.3125. So your answer, your final answer, you cannot make it to 3 significant figures. You need to write down the entire answer that appearing in your calculator, which is 25.3125. You understand what I mean? This is the part that I would like to highlight to you when it comes to upper bound, lower bound. Normally for upper bound, lower bound, we won't allow the students to write the answer to 3 significant figure. You can't basically round off your answer. Okay, only few selected questions that you can round off, not for upper bound, lower bound. Okay, and use the correct mathematical terminology. That means if the question I mentioned to you that use a sine rule, please make sure you use a sine rule. If the question said that solve using a cosine rule, make sure you use cosine rule. If let's say the question already said that use a sine rule, but there will be another alternative way. Probably you might think that without using Pythagoras theorem, you might get the answer. But even though you use the Pythagoras theorem to get the answer, but the question already said that use a sine rule, yet you still will lose marks because the question, you didn't follow the question once. That means you didn't follow the terminology that given by the question. Okay, and at the last I will mention that check your answer seems reasonable given the context and details of the question. So at last, please check your answers, and probably those questions is asking you to give a reason. Make sure you give a reason wherever it's necessary for you to give your final answer. Okay, so that's about it that I would like to cover it over here on the example of a candidate response. That I would like to wrap up over here that the command words is very important. Please take note on the command words and show your working thoroughly, and as well as please transfer your correct answer to the answer column. So you need to correctly identify the command words, then identify other keywords, informations are before you transfer it into the answer column. Before you come out with your final answer, then only you transfer it to the final in the what we call in the answer column. Okay, show your working, particularly important for the questions wherever they ask, show that. Okay, not necessary that only for show that you have to show working. Look at the component marks given. If the marks is 4 marks or 3 marks, definitely have to show working. If let's say 1 mark, that means probably you can straight away write down your answer in the answer column in order for you to get your answer. Okay, and make sure to write your answers clearly. If you want to change any answer, please cross over the answer out, then only write down the replacement answer. Okay, and please do not scribble, you just need to cut nicely. Check your working and your answers in order for you to avoid some errors, and set your working out clearly to easy to follow, and this will actually help the examiner to keep track on what you have actually done, and it actually will make us to check back on your work that you have actually through your whatever that you have done in your paper. Trust me that if you have done a very clean work, it actually will help the examiner to mark your work and try to write the logical order in answer space please try your best to write your answer in the logical order, because it will actually will make the examiner easily to mark your paper. Okay, and avoid rounding off the answer, and please use pencil when it comes to diagram. Okay, and also in the graph. That's what I would like to highlight to you over here. And please show your working, and make sure that you can recall, and you can actually make sure that you have understood all the mathematic techniques of the each topics that you know, and as well as all the formulas that involving especially on the few chapters like mensuration or trigonometry, all this formula. If you want, you can actually come out with a kind of a mind map in order for you to write down all the topics, or you can make what we call you can refer to the formula booklet. Okay, you can refer to the formula booklet in order for you to get back to the formula, but the formula is not provided in the exam. That's the reason why you need to recall back all the formulas, and you need to know how to get back to your what we call to the formula. Okay, so I'm wishing you all the very best for your IGCSE exam, and please do your best for your mathematics paper, and thank you for listening throughout the session for the seminar 2021, and thank you guys. Bye bye, take care.